Welcome to the Back Row Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Odell. The term It Girl has been applied to Gwyneth Paltrow, Chloe Sevigny, Grace Jones, Tina Chow, and Edie Sedgwick, among a host of other people. It girls are known to have style, taste, some fame but not too much, perhaps a well-known boyfriend or series of boyfriends. Most of all, the term is used to convey that there is something mysterious about the person who gets stuck with that label. My guest today is Marisa Meltzer, author of It Girl, The Life and Legacy of Jane Birkin. Jane Birkin is best known as being the namesake of the Birkin bag, an It handbag. And I wanted to hear from Marisa about how Jane dealt with being commodified as a bag. But I also wanted to get her thoughts on It girls in general, since I just published a book about one, too, about Gwyneth Paltrow called Gwyneth, the Biography. Can there be It girls in the age of social media? Or is it too hard to be both known and mysterious these days? We finish up the pod with a game, It Girl or Not an It Girl. But first, here's a quick excerpt from Gwyneth, the Biography, chapter 11, called It Happens. If you like what you hear, you can listen to the full book in Spotify, Apple, Audible, wherever you like to get your audiobooks. I'll include links in the show notes.
By the start of 1977, Gwyneth was very much an it girl. There were others around at that time, Liv Tyler, Alicia Silverstone, Winona Ryder, but Gwyneth was uniquely suited to the title. She was smart and discerning enough to exert some control over her image, to collaborate with high-caliber people and brands who wanted to associate with her, and privileged enough to think she could preserve some influence over the final outcome of those alliances. But that privilege had insulated her too well, and Gwyneth seemed to have no sense of what she didn't know. Having succeeded in being adored her entire life gave her an expansive confidence. Exposure to creative and wealthy people gave her a natural instinct for style and self-creation. But the one thing no one taught her, and what did not occur to her, was how to build an identity apart from all these insatiable, adoring influences. Gwyneth brushed off her it girl status. Kevin O'Quan would joke with her, "You're the big it girl." "Isn't it a fucking joke?" she'd answer.
For those listening who know nothing about Jane Birkin, other than she was the namesake of the Birkin bag, who was she? Was she a Nepo baby? Was she a society girl? Was she a mega celebrity? Give us the background on her.
She was born in England, and her mom was a famous stage actress and was like the muse to Noel Coward. And she grew up pretty upper class, went to boarding school at age 12, hated it, was kind of lost. And her parents sent her to Paris in that old school sort of finishing school way, like to kill time before she could become a debutante. And she moved back to London after her stint in Paris and decided to try acting, and was kind of a, typical multi-hyphenate sort of girl on the town. She was cast in some plays, and she was in a Cadbury commercial. Meanwhile, she got married at 18 to John Barry, who did the scores for the James Bond film. So she was part of this power couple, but he was in his early 30s. She was, I think, 17 when they started dating. So a really disastrous and short marriage. I think he mostly wanted to marry her because she was a virgin. And they had a baby, and she had to find out from her parents that he was in Italy with another woman. And she left him. And then she gets this call that there's a movie in Paris called Slogan. And she gets cast as the female lead and moves to Paris. And the co-star is Serge Gainsbourg, who's like a huge singer in France. And they instantly pretty much fall in love and become like the most famous couple in France.
What was it that made her an it girl, if you can say? I don't know if you saw in your reading, going back through the archives, was there like one article where she was first called an it girl? And when was that? Was it after the Cadbury commercial? Was it because of John Barry? Like, at what point in her life does she become seen in that way?
When she's still a teenager, right around in like 1964, 1965. And the Daily Mail is putting her along with Nico as like a face of the next year. And then she marries John Barry right around then and gets her first British Vogue profile where they misspell her name. And then she was in American Vogue maybe like a year or two later. So it's like she's starting to become this girl on the scene in London. Plus, she had the right look. She was skinny and kind of androgynous and had like the long bangs. She had that Penelope Tree, Twiggy, Jean Shrimpton look of the moment and dressed really well.
Did she have any interest in being a debutante?
I don't think so. No. And though her family was rich enough that they didn't seem to really worry about money, they also were kind of bohemian. And she had no interest in school and dropped out, and they didn't really make her do anything else. It was like, well, I guess you could just become a debutante and get married to like a nice man or, something like that.
Yeah, it's so funny because I've done 2 biographies, one on Anna Wintour and one on Gwyneth Paltrow, and both of them the same. Both of them did not have interest in school. I guess Gwyneth's parents, unlike Anna's, tried to push her in that direction. But you have to have some privilege, I think, in order to be able to reject that. I mean, for Gwyneth, you probably would have had to have some
Yeah.
privilege. But in London around this time, my understanding was that like a lot of girls didn't go on to college. Right?
Yeah. Schooling in Britain, you would sort of leave at 16 or so unless you were going on to higher education, and a lot of people didn't. So it was like very normal to leave school. There was less of this idea of like college was compulsory and that you would just do it to like kind of have that status or class or something like that. That even rich people didn't necessarily go. I think a lot of it was like, you're not necessarily going to work for a living and, you're going to end up married and whatever you vanity career, creative project or whatever. So it doesn't really matter which path you take.
When I was writing about Anna, it was so fun to learn more about swinging London. It's hard, I think, to capture now how significant of a cultural moment and place that was. But it was like this post-war boom where mini skirts were happening. Girls were obsessed with Twiggy. Anna was obsessed with Twiggy. Allegedly, that's what inspired her to be so thin, in part. The Beatles, bebop, like very fertile cultural moment.
Mhm. Yeah, and Jane Birkin was friends with the Beatles. She lived near Biba and Thea Porter stores. Yeah, I think you think about how bleak even the 50s were. Like the war ended, but London stayed, or England stayed a really hard place. Like they were having some crazy, crazy cold winters. And then rations went on there far later than anywhere else into the mid 50s. So people were just poor. And even if they weren't poor, they were just living under a very austere lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you define an it girl?
I think, like Jane Birkin, it's best when it's someone who's kind of multi hyphenate. Greta Lee is an it girl in a way, but she's so solidly an actress who happens to dress well. But I think a true it girl is someone who is very much representative of the time and place that they're in, but in this way that's like, if you know, you know. By definition, it should be hard to describe to your parents why this person is important.
Can you reverse engineer it girlness? Because we live in a moment with algorithms where influencers kind of engineer their popularity. Can you reverse engineer being an it girl?
Maybe. I mean, there's always so much talk about industry plants or something like that in music. I think that you could, in theory, have a large publicity team behind you. Addison Rae, for example, seems like she did a very good job at engineering herself. Even though she already had fame as kind of an influencer and a TikTok star, she was able to get the support, I think, of like Mel Ottenberg at Interview Magazine, who styled her. Whether or not she has genuine interest in some of the music that she talks about, or if people are just coaching her in the right way, she manages to come out with the right songs, the right looks, the right influences, the right producers and directors surrounding her to kind of make her seem genuinely cool. So, yeah, I think it can be done, but you have to be very, very savvy. I think people are probably trying to do it all the time now.
I guess I'm surprised by your answer because I would probably say that you can't. reverse engineered. But do we have it girls anymore just with social media? Because to me, being an it girl implies something mysterious. Like we don't know everything about this person, but there's something just fascinating about them. And I think it's very hard to become famous or just surface in an algorithm while retaining what seems like a sense of mystery.
I think you're right. I think that you can probably get so far and then actually crossing over into some sort of status where you can get invited to a lot of parties, but you might not be remembered in like the New York Magazine It Girl issue, 30 years later or something like that. I think, some It Girls, there was just a lot of mystery pre-internet. Like I remember growing up reading Vogue and the Miller sisters were in there all the time. So were the Ronsons. I had an understanding of who they were and a little bit of their background, but I just knew them as people who were just photographed a lot and seemed important to the social scene and all over the world, particularly New York. But, there was no way for me to be following them on social media or be directly influenced by them, I guess. I think that's also a difference is, pre-internet, there was no way to like quantify your influence. So it just had to be sort of understood. Whereas now you can say, I have 3 million followers and you can sell flat tummy tea directly to them or, whatever. The Kardashians are probably a good example of that evolution because at one point they were, I think, sort of LA it girls. Kim was to a certain level.
You would call them it girls?
I'm being generous with the term, I guess.
I think of an it girl as someone who has a rather specific sense of style. And it's like a sense of style that editors at Vogue would sanction for the 2010s or like maybe even into this decade. It would be like that Phoebe Philo look of sort of oversized clothes and like an awkward flat shoe. You know what I mean?
I do, but I also think there's sort of this idea of generational or regional it girls, like people who are very LA nightlife or someone who is like a Corey Kennedy type.
Saying regional it girls. That's a good concept. Going back to Jane, though, you talk a lot in the book about her relationships with John Barry, with Serge Gainsbourg. How did those relationships, would you say, affect her it status? I think about Gwyneth and how her relationships, I think, really vaulted her. And this could be sexist. And I mean, I'm just sort of stating, what I view as a fact. Like they kind of vaulted her to the next level and created this enormous intrigue around her. Like, who is this girl who's dating Brad Pitt and engaged to Brad Pitt and then moving on to Ben? You know what I mean? Ben Affleck.
Yeah, I mean, relationships are a huge social signifier. Like no one would necessarily know or care who Lauren Sanchez was if it wasn't for her relationship. And truly, part of the mystique of early Gwyneth was kind of like Jane Birkin, where she had these roles in these era defining of the moment films. But it was also like, who is this beautiful girl with this sort of rarefied air who's also dating some of the hottest up and coming people on the scene? Jane Birkin had that, except her sort of fetish or whatever was for much older, kind of mercurial men. She was dating these guys that were much older and much more established. So it was like she also got to kind of ride into a different level of fame because it was like, who is this 40-year-old's new, 21-year-old girlfriend? And,
Yeah, it's almost like Leonardo DiCaprio, right?
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, for sure. Except Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't make muses of any of his girlfriends. They're just silent in photos. Whereas these guys were making, a whole meal out of their relationship. I would say that she benefited from it in perhaps a way that Leonardo DiCaprio's, like I couldn't even name most of Leonardo DiCaprio's exes because they're just like a blur of 25-year-old models. And this at least is like you're getting songs bestowed upon you.
So let's talk about Birkin bags and the creation of the Birkin. So I want you to take us back to the moment on the plane when Hermès chief executive Jean-Louis Dumas was sitting next to Jane Birkin and told her she could use a better handbag. You describe it in the book as the ultimate serendipitous meet cute. I want to know, who was Jane Birkin at that time to Jean-Louis Dumas? Was she an it girl? Like, did he know who she was, and was he intrigued by her for her fame and her status.
Yeah, so this is the mid 80s, and I would be shocked if he didn't know who she was. She was one of the most famous people in the country. She had moved to France in 1968, so she had lived there for over 15 years and had been literally famous from the moment she moved, more or less. At one point, she was on the cover of Vogue France like twice a year for years. So she was hugely famous as a singer, as an actress, and she wore tons of YSL and Paco Rabanne. So she was a fashionable creature. But she had always carried a literal basket as a bag since she was a teenager. And I think this one had been broken or run over by her current boyfriend, Jacques Doyon, in an argument. And so it was especially rickety. She was also the kind of shambolic person that carried a copy of War and Peace and tampons and loose change and money and cigarettes and tissues and a gazillion other things with her. She had a baby, so I think she had like diapers and all kinds of stuff at the time. And it's just falling everywhere. And she's in first class on a flight from London to Paris.
Did she have her baby on the plane?
I don't think so, but she definitely had just stuff. It was her diaper bag. He was kind of like, you need a better bag. And she joked, when Hermès makes one, I'll carry it. And she claims she didn't know it was part of the Hermès family, let alone their sort of chief executive. And she was really good at drawing. So they started working on an air sickness bag and drew sort of a version of the Hermès hack, which was the bag that Serge Gainsbourg, her ex, used to use. And it was meant to carry saddles and lock up saddles. So it was huge and really heavy. So it's sort of like a shrunken tote size play on that bag. Hermès has always had a thing where very special customers could get custom piece made. I have no idea how to go about that.
I think you say in the book you could get like yacht interiors.
Yeah, you can get, a football.
Football? Why
You
would
can,
anyone need
you
that
can
or
get a
want that?
custom like knife carrier for a chef. Yeah, I've seen a basketball.
What would they charge for that, you know?
I saw the basketball actually in the office of an Hermès designer. So I don't know if it was something I don't even know. I mean,
Yeah, look
probably
out
in the tens of
Spalding.
thousands
Yeah.
because they're having to like make it completely custom and all of that. It probably takes weeks of work, right? So, I mean, anyway, so they made it and they liked it so much that they wanted to produce it.
Yeah. I mean, this encounter could have gone nowhere. And I think you said in the book that like Jane didn't know that they were going to make the bag, right? Why do you think they went ahead and made it and gave it to her?
Yeah, I think because she was Jane Birkin and she was famous and she was this kind of icon. It's sort of like
Hmm.
naming a bag you already had after Grace Kelly, and then it's the Kelly bag. So I think she was very much like taken in
Hmm.
and beloved by the French. And after moving there at 21, she never moved back to London. She stayed there until she died. Um, I think it was sort of like a token of honor. And also, she was very beautiful and chic and in the news and in famous movies. And she wasn't necessarily associated with another house the way that Carol Bouquet or certain actors were with Chanel or Dior or something like that. So there was room for her to be kind of a muse. And she'd been so good at being a muse. And so, yeah, I think she just thought, like, I think she forgot about it.
But she obviously went and picked it up and then decorated it with stickers. You point out in the book that it wasn't crazy to name a bag after a famous woman. Gucci's Jackie bag was named
Yeah.
for Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis.
Yeah.
Dior named a bag for Princess Diana. And you note that Hermes was not asking Jane to model or endorse the bag, and that Hermes did not then and does not now do celebrity ad campaigns. So one way to look at this is that the brand was co-opting Jane Birkin's name for a massively profitable product while getting out of paying her what she might have earned as an official spokesperson. What is your response to that point of view?
I think it's valid. I mean, if you look at something like Air Jordan, which I think was negotiated the same year. Look at all the money that Michael Jordan has made off of that venture with Nike. But he also went into it really different. He was an athlete, which has this history of monetary collaborations and, it was a whole line. It was based on his likeness and image and marketing and all of that. Whereas fashion, and this is probably very gendered, but has this history of bestowing something on someone and being a muse. And they use the words friend of the house. You're sitting front row, you're getting a free bag, you're maybe clothed by them. Now, maybe it's a little more codified in that you're maybe in an ad campaign or perfume ad or something like that. But it was just this kind of like ephemeral relationship that was kind of just a flattering honor for some people. And I think that's how Jane Birkin went into it. And I think that is why she never really pursued trying to get money for it, for better or for worse. Like so much of her career, again, it's not very modern or contemporary or very American, but she wasn't that motivated by money or ambition. And when I was at the auction for the original Birkin bag over the summer, and
which fetched $10.1 million, right?
yes. And, no one from her family was there. No one from Hermès was even there. I think they sort of see it all as just apart from them.
Yeah. How did Jane feel about the bag being named after her? Did she feel exploited financially or otherwise?
I don't think so, because I think that was just beyond the kind of thing that she thought about. I think she was in this kind of old school mindset of just being flattered. But I do think she had moments where it was odd. She was the kind of person who would joke about things in that way to like get ahead of it, like joked about how flat chested she was when she was younger, joked about her face and aging when she was older, and joked a lot about the bag. And so, she said that people would often say, Birkin like the bag. And she would kind of say, yeah, and the bag is going to sing now. She was very aware that people that met her didn't realize the connection, and she'd be carrying a Birkin bag, and someone would be selling fake ones on the street and being like, do you know what this is? And she was like, I do, I very much understand what it is. But she seemed to have a very good humor about it. Most people, it would be the biggest thing that had ever happened to them, and for her it wasn't, which again probably was very good for her kind of emotional state and sanity, just to feel completely divorced from
How
that.
much was she paid by Hermes for the use of her name?
Nothing. Eventually, they started donating about 40,000 or so euros a year to the charities of her choice. And that was important to her. But that's also a very small amount of money, considering the cheapest Hermes bag is probably about 15,000 or so.
Yeah, in the US, what is it, around 13,000 right now? Jacked it up because of the tariffs. Yeah, it's out of control. Yeah, so that would be like 3 of the cheapest Birkins.
Yeah.
You say in the book that she had a friendly relationship with the brand, often went to the fashion shows and sat front row happily. But in 2015, she threatened to boycott Hermes and have them remove her name from the bag, owing to what she found out about their use of exotic crocodile skins. So I want you to tell us what happened and if she actually had the power to get Hermes to remove her name from the bag.
I don't know if she had the power, neither from a legal standpoint nor from a kind of fame standpoint. She also was one to kind of pick and choose her politics. Like she was an advocate for Myanmar. She said, what she said about the crocodiles in the Birkin bag, but she was lifelong friends with Roman Polanski and Gerard Depardieu, and both Serge Gainsbourg and Jacques Doyon, her exes, have had um, myriad accusations and some even court cases against them about assault and harassment. I also just think, she was using her politics for, I guess, what she believed in, but there were plenty of things she conveniently overlooked.
Mhm. What did Hermes do to rectify the situation, or did they not?
They changed the sourcing of the crocodile.
So they were farmed instead of purchased from people hunting crocodiles. It's fascinating to me, now that fur is sort of verboten in fashion now, and I actually just got a release as we were recording that Vogue and Condé Nast are going fur free.
Like, fur is kind of back, but maybe it's a lot of vintage fur, that kind of wife thing.
Uh, People will argue. I know. People say that because of the like sort of the triumph of tacky, as I called it in the New York Times, like just like tacky stuff coming back. I don't know that the evidence fully backs it up. I mean, there is some interest, like the vintage furs are seemingly popular. I think that the anti-fur contingent would argue against that. Yeah, but it is interesting to me that crocodile skin or exotic skins, like snake skin as
Okay.
well, those bags are insanely expensive, like the Himalayan crocodile Birkin. It's crocodile, right? What are those? Those are like six-figure
Yeah.
bags, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've never heard of someone buying one just at retail, but they regularly sell on the secondhand market for around $300,000.
That's absolutely bananas. But anyway, it's interesting to me that now that, so much progress has been made by the anti-fur
Yeah.
activists and the Humane Society, the exotic skins, we haven't really seen that happen yet. So I'll be curious to see if that's next. But yeah, I do know that the VICs, the very important clients, love those bags.
They really do. I think part of the uproar is that you can see fur in stores, but they don't really have exotics in stores.
Also, a crocodile or a snake, they're not like cuddly and sweet like the furry animals. Anyway,
Right? Yeah.
yeah. You could argue that the it girl designation is ageist. They're called it girls, not it women or it dames. This designation, so it's generally reserved, I would say, in popular culture for younger women. Was there a point in Jane Birkin's life that she stopped being a quote unquote it girl, or did she evolve into like an it dame?
I think she was relevant for her whole life, but I do think one of her kind of challenges of her lifetime was going beyond that girl kind of moniker. She was typecast as ditzy, girlish, well into her mid 30s and on. And in the early 80s, she left Serge Gainsbourg. She was really much under his wing forever. And that's also when she started dressing a little more masculine, less baby doll. She was wearing trousers and oversized men's shirts and sneakers and instead of like mini skirts. And she was taking more serious roles as an actor. I think that she really got fed up of being just this silly little English girl when she had 3 kids and was 40 years old. Maybe a little bit of her it girldom was replaced by her daughters who, it girl nepo babies. Like, she had Charlotte Gainsbourg and Lou Doyon, who are, very famous as kind of multi hyphenates as well in their
Mhm.
own rights.
You say that she wanted to remove the mirrors from her home as she got older, which made me really sad. How did being an it girl affect her as a human being?
I think when you're so celebrated at such a young age and all the photos of you that people are still trying to get you to sign when you're 60, 70, or of when you're 19, 20, 21, etc. That's gotta be rough. People want this version of you that's frozen in time. I wonder if Gwyneth Paltrow is also, dealing with this to some extent, just as any aging actress is. There's not a lot of room for women to age in public. And Jane Birkin, for whatever reason, didn't get a facelift. And she had the face of someone who had smoked and spent a lot of time in the sun and was in her 70s. She also battled cancer for a very long time. So again, she made a lot of jokes about wanting to avoid the mirror, that she was fat for the first time. And that's really sad. I also think she had this mother who was very diva, very glam, and beautiful, but in a very different way than Jane Birkin was kind of more like golden age of Hollywood film star, like va 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 voom. And so I think just Jane Birkin had always felt kind of like she couldn't win. She sometimes said that's why she liked posing. She posed for a lot of erotic men's magazines, or she just posed naked in general a lot. And I think she liked that in some ways because it was validation. But yeah, I do think that she sought and got a lot of validation externally. And that's harder and harder to come by as you age because of just how society works.
Yeah, I heard the same thing about Gwyneth, who herself loves a nude photo moment here and there, and she shares it on Instagram and it goes viral. I mean, one
She
of my
sure
Gwyneth
does.
sources
Yeah.
told me,
Yeah.
because Gwyneth has been in the news, like she's always finds a way to stay in the news. And one of my sources told me, I just don't know how you have a sense of yourself at that point, like if you're not written about. And when that becomes part of your identity, you it's disorienting to not have that validation and not have that
Hmm.
attention.
Yeah. And Gwyneth and Jane Birkin got famous at the same very young age. So it's like, how much of your life do you even, and they both had famous parents. So it's like, how much of your life do you even remember not being written about and famous?
Yeah. I think about the famous parents a lot. Like, can you imagine? I mean, my parents are not famous, but can you imagine? Like, your mother is Blythe Danner. Some people regard her as a better actress than Meryl Streep. Your dad is Bruce Paltrow, and he is this famous producer who people are fear and respect and admire. Your godfather is Steven Spielberg, for God's sake. Can you imagine growing up, like the pressure that you would feel?
Yeah, but I also grew up as someone who had no desire to work in any of the fields that my parents did. So the pressure of that, the expectations, and then choosing to do it is a little wild to
It's just
me. But no,
that's
I can't.
my way of sort of viewing, I guess, their like Gwyneth's ambition. And she would say, or in her early interviews, like, I'm not ambitious. And it's like, it doesn't really square with the reality of what you're doing and what I'm hearing from people. But obviously, like, people don't like ambitious women.
Hmm.
I don't think we like ambitious women to this day in
No,
2025. So I can understand why she would downplay that. But I think, to her credit, I think she is really ambitious. Do you think Jane Birkin was ambitious?
I think she was medium ambitious. I think that in order to stay in the public eye and get those kinds of roles and keep touring, you have to be ambitious because she could have just not done it, particularly after she was diagnosed with cancer and to keep touring. I think she either wanted that kind of audience validation or the money or whatever.
Distraction, maybe.
But she wasn't, yeah, but also it wasn't ambition in a way that we understand it here, or like a classic kind of Hollywood narrative. Like, yes, she started taking harder roles and left Serge and fought to, be seen as more than just a girl. But then it's not like, and then she won the Academy Award and became the most famous person in France and, like chased dreams and, cracked into the, British and American market. She didn't do any of those things. I think she was ambitious, but I also think she also wanted to very much have a personal life. I don't think she ever wanted to, go to LA and have meetings or, she barely even did
Hmm.
anything in London.
Okay, before you go, I want to do a rapid fire game. I'm going to say a name and you say if they're an it girl or not an it girl. Becca Bloom.
No, too manufactured.
I agree. Anna Wintour.
Yes, in a specific
I would
time.
say yes.
In like early, yes, 60s.
She's someone who still has mystery.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
in spades.
Apple
Yes.
Martin.
I'm gonna say yes, but she's really on the edge of not for me.
I would say yes. I would say yes, even though she was just in a Gap ad, which feels
Yeah, that's
not
what makes me
intriguing.
feel like,
I do think that
yeah,
there's mystery there still.
there is.
Charlie XCX.
Yeah, I think more so a few years ago, less so than when she's completely famous. But I was in Paris and saw her at a bar, very like, normal looking. No one was really approaching her. And it was very like, ooh. And it wasn't like seeing Gwyneth Paltrow at a bar. It wasn't like this crazy level of fame, but it was like, I felt validated that the bar that I was at was cool just by her presence, which feels very
Look
it
how cool
girl.
you are, Marissa. Lauren
Thank you.
Sanchez.
No, too old, too manufactured.
I think too much
Yeah.
exposure. And we know a lot because she got together with Jeff Bezos
Yeah.
through that affair, which spilled into the tabloids in a very awkward way.
Yeah. Maybe if it had happened in a slightly different time or at a different age in both of their lives, but no.
Io Debris.
Yeah, I think so. Although she's a bit like Greta Lee in that she's so She's more just like an actor who seems to be cool and dresses well. But yeah, I think she's embodies a certain spirit of the
She's
time.
also a new, it was recently announced, Chanel face.
Yes, yes.
Alix Earle.
Yes, was a little now I think she's trapped. I think there's this like it girl into influencer into girl boss kind of trajectory. And I think Alix Earle is in the girl boss era, but yes.
Fascinating.
I think she started as
I
one.
haven't thought of her as the girl boss, but that's interesting. Hailey Bieber.
Again, she's in the girl boss era, but at one point I would have thought her as kind of thought of her as sort of like a regional it girl, like an LA it girl kind of thing, or wherever she was from.
She's borderline for me because I don't know, I find myself really kind of enjoying a lot of the things that she wears. I think that she often has really good style moments, which seems kind of like a
Mhm.
requirement of being an it girl. And last one, Anouk Yai.
Yes.
Definitely for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a classic one.
Yeah, because we don't know that much about her. She's gorgeous. She's
No, I
amazing
don't know that much
style.
about her, but I also like didn't have to pause and think. She's also not like it's not something where it's like Haley, where you're like, well, she did make $1 billion off of selling a company. Like, you know, Anouk is more, it's more like ephemeral. You know it when you see it.
Yeah. Well, Marisa, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you so much for doing it.
And everyone go buy It Girl, The Life and Legacy of Jane Birkin.